Good evening and welcome to Hot Topics from the Soul. I'm so delighted to be here with you another Tuesday. I have my co host.
And good evening and happy Tuesday to you and everyone. As usual, you're looking stunning and you're all ready. I mean, listen, your birthday was last week, but you act like you're still turning the clock backwards. We'll talk about that secret later. But but wow, tonight's show is going to really be something that I think people will want to hear about, considering the fact that it's National Domestic Violence Awareness Month.
Yeah, this is always very dear to me as well. And Dr. J, you have a nonprofit. Would you tell the audience what your nonprofit does as it relates to domestic violence?
Absolutely. Destiny by Choice, we've been established since the year 2000, and it's all about empowering lives and shaping destinies of those impacted by domestic violence and fatherlessness and other social determinants. And basically, Destiny by Choice really addresses education, advocacy, also trainings and workshops dealing around the issue of domestic violence and those social determinants. So being able to whether refer or have group counseling, individual counseling is part of what we do. But most of all, it's about really making inroads inside of this issue of domestic violence to make sure that it doesn't remain silent.
Yeah, I applaud your work because of the fact that here you are, a male advocating for relief as it relates to domestic violence. How can individuals find out about your website, the work you do, and how they can support? Because, a lot of times, we're here on the ground working grassroots, and people think, okay, if there's a need, we can take care of it readily because we're here in the neighborhood, but the problem is when it comes down to giving to nonprofits like domestic violence, they tend to lean to the more larger organizations, but when they need help, they reach to the local because they can readily call and get someone on the phone. So how can they find out more about you and how to support your work?
Well, they can find out more about me by going to our other website, destinybychoice.org. They can find out that way. And of course, they can find us on Facebook, where we have a page, jrficklin.com, as well as Domestic Violence. It is your business page. But Dr. Val, you hit it on the head. What people have to understand, though organizations such as yours and mine, we are addressing the issue of domestic violence. We're helping families. We're there in the trenches. We are accessible to people. We don't generally get the mainstream funding because so much of that funding is earmarked to the largest shelters and centers and those things there, which safety is important and shelter is important. But the reality is that being able to connect and relate is also important. And that's where we come in at. We do have a specialty, if you would, that many of those entities don't have. We're bilingual. We speak the language of both of domestic violence from a
Right.
social clinical level as well as from a cultural level, even a faith level. So we're reachable. So we need their support. We need their support, whether or not they're doing monthly donations or one-time donation. We need their support, whether or not they're donating resources to us. So, as much as we do it with a smile and with the tenacity that we do it, it does not negate the fact that we still need their support. So, once again, going to our website, my second website is destinybychoice.org is up and going again.
Yes.
There's a
Okay.
place there to donate and contribute, and it's tax deductible, and we definitely will appreciate you because you will help save lives. Dr. Val, you have done it. I've done it several times. Many times we've done it out of our pockets where we've had to help people escape, people
Yes.
relocate, people
Yes.
needing clothes on their back, mothers who may not have things, and it's not always feasible at the time. Sometimes shelters are crowded, they can't help or whatever. So we've been able to do that, but the funding haven't exactly fallen through the crack for us in the way that we need it. So any help, any support for organizations such as my organization, as well as Soul of a Woman, is much needed.
Yeah. Thank you so much for giving that information. We got an exciting guest tonight.
Yes, we do. Dr. Val, when I think about tenacity, when I think about resiliency, when I think about persistence, of course, your picture comes up immediately. And over the years, I've met some incredible survivors, incredible people that have gone through things, and their
Yeah.
stories are yet to be told. And so it is with our guest tonight. Our guest tonight, I met several years ago. She is not only a survivor of domestic violence and dating violence, but her story is interesting and compelling because the fact, like many cases, the relationship did not start off abusive or violent. Matter of fact, very sweet, very what appeared to be loving, and because of just a few decisions. Sometimes that decision is that we need to back up, we need to slow down. That decision is, well, I need to focus on where I'm going right now, and that brings out the worst in individual. And so our guest today is Natalie Purdie, and I always say that because it's so easily to call her Purdue, but it's
Yeah.
Natalie Purdie. She was a victim of a violent attack by a boyfriend on September 7th, 1986 is when this started. She pressed charges and testified against him. But the most unbelievable thing about this, it was a Dr. Jekyl, Mr. Hyde type of experience that left her being beaten violently, and her grandmother ended up witnessing the tail end of her being beaten violently, and and left her with physical damage, emotional damage, but all those things she's overcome. Natalie has appeared on many different shows since that time, telling her story, including Dates from Hell on the ID channel, Say Yes and No on the ID channel. She's also been on Lifetime Movie Network. Dated a psycho. I know there are a lot of folks that can amen that they dated a
Hmm.
psycho. Changing Life television show, Healing Word Fellowship, and the list goes on. Even with the Real Housewives of Atlanta, and she's done some candid conversation with Stacey Bryan, and she'll tell you more about it. But her advocacy work has continued to reach out to dating violence to young people, young women, especially when it comes to violence. And she's continued to be a very great help there in the state of Georgia, where she was very much part of a intricate part in the passing of the, if you would call the Marsy's Law in Georgia, as well as ERA. So Natalie is she's an author, she's a mother, she's an advocate, and she's our guest tonight. So let's welcome Natalie Purdie.
Good evening, Queen. How are you?
Good evening. How are both of you?
I'm well.
Doing
I'm
great.
so glad to be able to see you.
Same here. Thank you.
This
I'm
game
so
called
elated to
life.
be on your platform.
This game called life. You know,
Y-
our lives intertwine because of common thing, domestic violence.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So Natalie, when you hear your story retold, or when you see it airing on ID network, or when you see it in news clips, what comes back to you? I mean, are you reliving a moment all over again, or what exactly happens? Because people tend to think just because we're out of an abusive relationship that it's gone, it doesn't necessarily bother me, but how does it resonate with you?
I watched it so many times before. A lot of times watching it and showing it to someone else is
Wow.
usually what happens. And I get emotional at times. I usually get emotional around a certain part of the clip, when I talk about how he got away with it, and mainly on the part when I talk about the physical challenges and how it just totally shifted and changed my life,
Wow.
and that makes me hurt.
If you don't mind, keep because many of our viewers may not have seen the clip or seen the show. If you could
Mhm.
just, in your way, kind of take us back there and kind of bring us up to those parts, because this was dating violence for you. You're a young lady. Now that you're not a young lady now, but you were
I know,
when
right?
you, you were a young lady, and everything looked like it was going great.
Yes, yes. I was so young, and didn't have the experience. And the main part, the part that I was talking about when I really get upset, is just talking about how so close to death that I came, and just all of the challenges that I had to overcome. So For those who don't know my story, I dated a guy and I specifically told him I wasn't ready to get serious. And our conversations never really got serious. It was almost like it was here and there, like, what if? And so I really didn't think that it was leading to anything serious.
Well, what were your ages so the audience can know? Because I often talk to young girls regarding dating, and to let them know domestic violence happens at any age. You got kids that are being abused, victimized in high school, junior high school, talking about they got a boyfriend and girlfriend. You too young to even have a boyfriend or girlfriend, but they are being physically abused in battered situations.
Yes, Dr. Thicklin is smiling because he knows. Dr. Valerie, are you talking to me? That was definitely the case. I was too young. I met
Yeah, that's what
him.
I would. You don't have to give your exact age, but I wanted to know: were you in high school, or did you just graduate high
Had
school, or
just
you're young?
freshly graduated.
Yeah, so
Now,
people don't think that domestic violence happens to young
oh
teenagers,
yes, yes,
adults.
that's my audience that really touches my
Hmm.
heart, and I really fight to talk to them because they don't know. Teenagers to young adult, so college kids who have not really been in a serious relationship. It's different if you have a relationship and you're at home, but once you go off to school,
Hmm.
those dynamics really change a lot. And I was about to go off to school. I had just
Wow.
graduated from high school, and um, I'm definitely in that dynamic of really thinking. At that time, I thought I was invincible. I really didn't think that something like that would happen to me, and I definitely didn't have anyone to talk to me about it. Of just the awareness about any type of violence. Yes, you hear the type of violence that if someone hits you, then you should leave. But I wasn't taught all of the other types of abuse, the emotional abuse. There's sexual abuse. You can be a teenager and still be financially abused. He had
Wow.
money, so he was always buying me these lavish gifts. And I can remember my aunt saying, like, she didn't like me accepting certain gifts. So I did know that much. I didn't know about as much in detail about the control of financial abuse, but I did know that when he bought me certain gifts, that I was like, "Ooh, that's too expensive. And what do you want in return that I can't
Hmm.
pay for?" And so
Wow.
that was one of the conversations on that night when he attacked me. That was the first thing I said to him. Let me give you back the gifts. Let me give you back any and everything you ever bought.
Mm.
Wow.
Because in my mind, I always remembered my aunt telling me, be careful about accepting gifts. And I want to point out the fact that he was older, and I always dated older. And I think that if a guy is dating a young girl,
Control.
there's something, yes. Why is he not dating someone his age?
Hmm.
And I thought, well, I was mature, but I just still didn't have as much experience, but I was more mature. But also, I thought that I thought that it was easier with him. I didn't have the peer pressure that I was experiencing with guys my age. Guys
Right.
my age, they didn't respect my curfew. And so when I teach teen dating violence, that's the one thing I say is if someone, if they want you to go against any boundaries you have, whether it's your parents setting a curfew or how you can have company or when you can be on the phone, if they ask you to break those boundaries, then they don't respect you. Well,
Hmm.
guess what? He respected me.
Wow.
Any boundary I had, if I said I said I would he would say, "Well, can we go to the movies?" And at the time I lived with my grandparents, and I hated to ask. So I would tell him, "Well, you go ask." He would he had no problem. He
And he
would
was a
go.
lot older than you were.
Yes, he was 24. I
Hmm.
was 18.
Hmm.
And he would go in and he would speak to my grandmother, very mannerable, and say, "Can I take Natalie out? We're going to the movies." And she'd be like, "Well, what movie? What time?" And he had everything down packed. And he never tried to not take me to the movies, as what I would experience with peer pressure from other guys. Like, "Oh, we don't have to go to the movies. We
Mm-hmm.
just said that, let's go somewhere else." He didn't. If he said we were going to the movies, we went to the movies. If she said have her back at 11, we were back at 10 minutes to 11. He never
Mm.
asked me to be late. He never, broke my curfew or had me back late or anything. So I definitely didn't see any signs.
Exactly.
But those are the typical signs of teen dating violence. Someone trying to control you,
Right.
trying to put you against your family members. He didn't do any of that.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Now that says a mouthful because, as you're saying, when we typically talk about warning signs, early warning signs, it is we see it in terms of those type things, the power control, causing you to break the boundaries or the rules that may be set. And so those things there, we normally say, well, those are red flags. But in your case, what makes your situation very compelling is because of the fact every appearance of him was
Hmm.
good guy,
Yes.
respectable, manable, and everything. But there's another side of
Would
it
drive me to
because,
church.
yeah, well, even at
This
the
is
church, look,
very creepy and scary.
yeah,
Very.
yeah,
Very scary.
When he attacked me, Dr. Valerie, my family was like, "Who did it?"
wow,
They thought it was somebody else. Who attacked her? No one could guess that it would be him.
Hmm.
hmm.
I
So
had
is
an ex-boyfriend before him who was very boisterous about not wanting to break up. He would call all the time. He would be trying to come over and things like that. And I didn't know the difference. That was natural. That was normal. He
mhm.
expressed his feelings. I'm hurt. I'm sad. This guy was totally opposite, but I took it as calm, cool, and collected. Oh, he never gets angry. We've never had an
Hmm.
argument. We've never had a disagreement. He's so mature.
How long did this continue? The relationship before he became an abuser?
That's just it. I knew him for almost 3 years. Never,
Wow.
never, never, not once,
Wow.
not one time.
That is scary.
Yes. So what was
But
happening
then
was,
again, I dated my first husband 3.5 years before we got married, and I didn't know. But I knew he had a temper because he would get mad at certain things, but he never got mad at me. So I didn't associate the thing because I didn't know.
mhm,
So that is possible.
yes, yes. What happened was he was bottling up everything, and it
Mm.
was festering. And come to find out later, he only attacks when you try to leave.
Wow.
So when I said I wanted to end the relationship or slow things down, is when he got upset. So that was my first time experiencing it, my first and last time.
And so to a certain degree, you would say he was complying. He was going along with your requests, your boundaries, and those things, as long as it meant that he still had access to you, that he still was in a relationship with you. But when you begin to back up and say, we need to slow things down, or I need to focus on my, you know, my career going forward, or I can't, you know, be committed in this because I have things to do. You begin to see a different person because perhaps now he feels this sense of losing you, or perhaps even abandonment.
Yes.
Depending on his background, was he abandoned? Did he have abandonment issue? People leaving, and I bring that up because so often, when we get in relationships, whether teen dating or adults, we're attracted to so many different things, right? And oftentimes, and so we have our set of questions that we ask, but we never we never really go deep enough. We
Never
start talking
asked
about what
about
you
their
like, your favorite
history.
dish, your favorite that, what you like, where you like to go, and all those things, and that's fine. But when you start talking about background, what has happened in your life, what is those experiences, you uncover a lot of things. And so typically if you deal with a person who has abandonment issues and those type of things, boy, that can be scary because the fact they
Mm,
already are dealing deep seated with someone leaving them and the pain
Yes.
of being alone and leaving me, because leaving me means what? Rejection.
mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Leaving me means that you're rejecting me. And so here was a case having spent this second time with you. And now you're talking about, no, we got, I got to slow it up. And he wasn't having it. And that's why I described it as going from Dr. Jekyll to Mr. Hyde.
Mm-hmm.
Bring
Yes.
us into bring us into that incident, because up until then, I mean, think about it, he had won the confidence and the approval of your family.
Oh, absolutely. Before I even go bring you to that point, Dr. Thicklin, I want to touch on something that you said because it just hit me and I'll forget it. Um, that's something that abusers do. You ever notice that? Um, the one thing that they do is they dive into you.
Mhm.
Tell me your hurt. Tell me your pain. Tell me your fears. Tell me what you like. Tell me what you dislike. Tell me about your mother. Tell me what you don't like about your mother. Tell me
Mhm.
about your father. Is he around? Oh, he's not around. We as women, we're talkers. And it's not that it can't happen with men as well.
Mhm.
When you're in that relationship, you feel like, wow, they really care about me and they really want to know about me. And you don't even realize that that person is not sharing as much.
That is a key point. Very key point there. And we have to highlight that, because sometimes it feels good when people open up and they're sharing and they're hearing you, because all of us love being heard. Think about it.
Yes. It's
We
like
love
nobody heard
being
me
heard.
before. Oh, he cares about me. He
And it
wants to know
sounds that way.
everything about me.
But your point is so well taken, because we have to make sure, hold up, they know everything about me and I know very little about them.
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, that's why when I got married this time, we visited each other's families and I asked questions.
Yes.
Yeah.
I had a victim last year, this time at Candlelight Vigil, and young girl here. And all of her friends said the same thing, that this guy appeared, literally appeared out of nowhere. And nobody really knew anything about him or where he came from.
Mm.
And this guy was like in his 20s. And then they started realizing, like, where does he live? He was homeless. Yes, he was homeless. And actually, like, attached yourself to this young lady. And she ended up getting an apartment and really like just being there for him. And it was like, everybody leaves me. And so she really attached herself not to leave him.
Mm.
And
Wow.
Still
unfortunate,
abuse
yes,
and
unfortunate tragedy.
manipulation.
Notice I said a candlelight vigil.
Mm.
Meaning that she met her demise.
Hmm. Her and her mother.
Wow.
Yes, but anyway, I'm sorry. I don't want to go away. So you were saying to take you to where with him with the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. It was immediately in that conversation. So I didn't get to see. I didn't have a point where it led up to this. It was that night.
It just
Wow.
happened.
It just happened. But this is the thing about it. I always watch. I've always been that type of person that I want to watch your mannerism. I want to watch if your mood has changed. I listened to see if his tone would change. Was he looking tense? I'm
Why did you
watching.
do that?
I'm from New York.
Okay. I was wondering if it's because you were in an abusive situation before and you were watching to make sure that the eating have the same attributes as the last relationship.
Oh, yes. No, I had never experienced it before. And just being from New York and seeing people that I grew up with, like I remember one time I was in high school and I was getting ready for school and my mom got mugged, like right there in our build, like the same floor. Like she got on the elevator and someone grabbed her and they basically dragged her down the stairs. So I would always be like kind of mindful of my surroundings. And I knew that I was telling him bad news. So I just was more of, oh man, is he hurt? I was more of caring for him as opposed to seeing if something would happen. I definitely didn't think that something would happen, but I did want to know how he was feeling. Was he mad? What was his reaction going to be?
Mhm.
So I was watching physical body language and his tone and everything, but it was more so of me caring for him and feeling kind of bad, like, oh, I'm breaking this bad news to him. That was more of my concern.
Right.
And I didn't see it. He still remained that same person. His tone didn't change. His language didn't change. He just kept saying, "But why, Natalie? I love you."
Mm,
That's all he kept saying. And I would come up with another reason of like, I'm too young. My parents are never going to condone this. I didn't know you meant that you were ready to move so fast. When you asked me about about being married, like, well, how many kids would you like if we got married, or what kind of car would you like, or what kind of house, and things like that. I didn't think you meant us like tomorrow. And
mm,
so that's what I was explaining to him. And so every time I kept coming up with another reason, like I've never even had my own apartment, and you want me to move from rules and regulations here to move in with you. Like, what about, like, I just went to a pep rally last week on the college campus. I don't want to come home and have to cook dinner.
mm-hmm,
Just the things that I wanted to do. And he just kept saying, "Well, why, Natalie? I love you." And finally I said, "Well, it's getting late. So maybe we should talk tomorrow." But then at the same time, I don't want you to get mixed feel. I don't want to give you mixed messages. So maybe we should just take a break, maybe break up. I don't know. I'm 18. I don't know. I don't know if you remember when you were 18. You like him today, you hate him tomorrow. 2 hours later, why haven't you called me back? You told me don't call you
mm-hmm,
anymore. you know. So that I was in that mindset, and so um, I was basically saying that to him, like, I don't know, yes, no, maybe so, and he said, "Okay," and I said, "Well, it's getting late." And mind you, this is a person who was always respectful of the time and respectful of the curfew. And then I was with my grandparents. My grandfather wasn't home. My grandmother was there. And I was like, my grandfather should be coming home soon. So, maybe she go ahead and get ready to go. And he said, okay. And we sat there. It was a little bit of an awkward silence. And then I heard him getting up. So I got up and I was closer to the door. So I started walking towards the door. And that's that Holy Spirit, that voice that we sometimes listen to, sometimes we think is just nothing, but something just told me, oh, make sure he's behind you, like he's walking behind you, because I heard him get up, but I didn't actually like look physically see him get up. And
mm-hmm,
so I looked, and by the time I turned to look to see if he was behind me, his hand was in the air already. So before he arrived, I was putting out my senior pictures, and I had moved all of that over to the side to give him my undivided attention. But at one point, remember, I offered to give him the items back. He said, "I can't take those items." I was pulling them out the closet. I didn't have much of a wardrobe back then. So I pulled them out the closet. He said, "I can't. I don't want them back, but I can't take them out like that anyway." And I was like, "Let me go get the bag. Let me go get a bag." So that's when I left out the room. And when I came back, he shifted in the room. He was on another side of the room, but he was closer to where I had the pictures. So I
mm,
don't know if he was looking at my list of who I was giving pictures to, or if he just went because he knew that's where I had the scissors. But I took it as he moved further away from the door in case someone walked past, they wouldn't hear him getting the bad news. So that's what I thought. So I just came back in the room and I sat where he was sitting. And so, like I said, walking out of the door, by the time I turned around, he had the scissors in the air and he was already coming down. So he just started stabbing me. And he just started stabbing me all over. And so naturally, I went into shock. But I just kept saying, I'll marry you. I'll marry you. I'll marry you. Because I thought that's the only thing that would maybe make you stop. And so I just kept saying that over and over. And so my grandmother was on the phone and she thought we were playing at first. Because remember, this is someone that my grandmother didn't know how old he was, but she did know that he appeared to be a little bit more mature. And this was the type of person, we never had an argument. Never seen us with a disagreement. You never seen him storming out the house like, well, I'll talk to you later. The typical teenager stuff or whatever. Like, oh, he left in a hurry. We never had any of that. So the last thing on her mind would be that he would be attacking me. And so I kept screaming. He kept stabbing me. And then with me trying to get away from him is when stuff started falling over. And that's when she said, wait a minute. Because she was on the phone. So, you're hearing and you're listening to two different conversations. She said, wait a minute, I think they're fighting. I better go. So she hung up the phone and she said that when she came to the door, she couldn't see us at first. So she kind of looked and didn't see us in the room. She was going back out to go look in another room. And just as she was going back out, she faintly heard me calling her again. What happened was he had me in the far corner that was aligned with the door, and he had me wedged. So you had to actually come in to look and see where he had me wedged in the corner of the far corner of the room.
Jesus.
And he was straddled over me. And so by this time, he had did majority of the stabbing. And I had hit my head. So from that point, I went unconscious by the time she came in. She only saw him straddled over and saw his hand in a motion. So she thought he was punching me. So she grabbed him because she was calling him, but he wasn't hearing her. So she grabbed him by the shoulders, like, get off of her. And by that point, he turned and he stared at her. And that's when she saw the blood in the scissors and realized that he was stabbing me. And so from that point, she saw that his eyes were glassy, like there was a disconnect. So she started just getting ready to back out of the room. And her first thought was, let me go try and get a weapon. But then quickly, I always tell her, you saved my life because of your quick thinking that he's not in his right mind. And so his strength is definitely going to overpower her, not to mention he's a man and he's younger. So instead, she ran out the room and she ran and called 911. And when she got out of the room, he went back.
But she was still in the house?
Still in the house. Yes. And he went back to stabbing me.
Oh, my God.
Yes, while she was on the phone with 911.
Oh,
He
my
went back
God.
to stabbing me. And then once he started hearing her giving the description and everything, then he got up and ran out. You okay, Dr. Valerie?
Oh, my God. I'm like, just what, as you were telling, I'm walking through it and then just like, woo.
Mm-hmm.
The traumatization, because this is trauma. Your grandmother walks in, after being dismissive, because then maybe they're just playing, and she walks in, and then when she does finally see you, she thinks not that punching makes it any better, any less. She thinks that he's punching, and she goes and grab him, nudge him on the shoulder, tell him to stop, only to see him turn around with scissors in his hand. You're bleeding, and all these things are happening there. And you're right, her looking in his eyes and seeing basically evil.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Hyde had arrived.
Yes.
And so with her quick thinking, sometimes that's, hey, that's flight that flight of flight too, right? And
Yes.
so she
Yes.
flew. And
Yes.
she goes and she calls 911. But
Mm-hmm.
the reality is, here you are, you're going out in and out of consciousness, you're bleeding, all of these things are happening to you. And I can only imagine the thoughts that are going on in your mind, because this is classic Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde.
Mm-hmm.
And the
I mean, like
rage
you said,
he had is just like it's a miracle he didn't attack your grandmother.
Yes.
exactly.
I think it was because of the rage was more towards me. So the thing about, like you said, Dr. Thicklin, it's you're shocked to see that your grandchild is laying there stabbed. But let me just tell you my injuries. He cut my whole nose open. So this whole side of my nose was cut open. He stabbed my lips. He stabbed the side of my face right here. He stabbed behind my ear, and this caused a lot of blood. He's so close to my jugular, and then all the rest were defensive wounds of my hands. I don't know if you can
Yeah, the
really see,
abusers,
but
usually the guys always try and go for the face because they
yes,
figure
he
if they
stabbed my face.
defame you.
And then all on my arms, even in the back, like in the back of my arms. I don't know if you could see it, but all on my arms, and then my legs. But I had on jeans. But he stabbed my legs, and when I fell from trying to get away from him, I don't know. I don't. I don't remember what he was doing, but I had a fractured skull with a blood tumor on my brain. And so, due to the fractured skull with the blood tumor, it temporarily paralyzed my whole left side, including my left eye muscles. So, I temporarily lost my sight. I lost my memory. I had post traumatic seizures, and I had to learn how to read, write, and walk all over again.
Wow. You know, one of
And
our,
Nicole Coleman says that she saw your story on ID and that you're a phenomenal queen. And
Thank
thank you for
you.
having the courage
Oh,
to
thank
speak up
you.
and speak out about this.
Thank you.
I'm just like, because I'm a victim of domestic violence too, but however, not to that point where I was stabbed or anything like that. It's just walking through. It's like the emotions kind of flourish, the fear, the pain, it's just a lot, very overwhelming.
Mhm, mhm.
When you was talking, I wasn't breathing. You were like, "You all right, Dr. Valerie?" I wasn't
yeah,
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 breathing.
I saw you.
I couldn't breathe. It was like,
one point I want to bring, not only as a male, but as a brother. I grew up with six sisters. As a father, when I think about my princess and things, it still baffles me how we can exert that type of power, that type of control, that type of viciousness on anyone, especially a woman.
Mhm,
And yet, it's still at this point here, like so many domestic violence cases, it brought in other people. It brought your grandmother into it. It brought other people into it. And so domestic violence never is so private and silent that it only affects the two people that's involved.
mhm,
It reaches out and it touches everyone that's connected to you. It touches everyone that that love you. It touches everyone that work with you or go to school with you. And here was a case with all the physical and emotional damage that was done. I mean, literally, people have to think about it. And this is why I always say domestic violence is not a simple cut and dry thing. It is very complex, very layers upon so many things, emotional, mental, physical. And folks say, well, if I just get out. It's not that easy. And even when you've gotten out, you could be in physical safety, but not mental and emotional safety anymore because that's been violated. And so when you tell your story from the aspect of a young girl, 18 at the time, and these type of things happening, and we see it happening younger, it behooves us as parents, it behooves us as individuals, as mentors, to really have this conversation, start having conversations because these things happen. And no matter how much society glorifies this type of stuff, it's never good. Young girls oftentimes seek approval. They seek attention, they seek approval. Uh, like being in a relationship, like feeling popular, like feeling affirmed. Oftentimes identity. It's identity for them. Everybody else has a boyfriend. You don't have one. So what's wrong with you?
Hmm.
And so you're just glad to be in something, not understanding the cost, not understanding the danger. And so once again, when we start talking about dating, when we start talking about being involved in a relationship, we have to we have to take a longer perspective. And in your case, you did everything that you could do. But what it does tell us is that there are silent signs. Silent signs of always complying.
Hmm.
Well,
Yes.
why would that be a sign? Always complying. I tell you, because it looks like this. Girl, he does anything I ask him to. He'll never argue. He'll never say anything. He does everything. I have a good man.
Yes. Yes.
And it sounds
Exactly.
that way. It
Hmm.
looks that way. But then you look back at it and you saw it. Hold it.
No emotions.
No emotions, exactly.
You're not
So,
mad. You're not sad. You're not angry. You're not upset. No emotions. Always even keel. Too
Mhm.
good to be
Dr. Val,
true.
that's
It
that's
is.
kind of scary
It
within
is
itself, right?
terrifying, and like I said, I couldn't breathe while she was telling the story. And I have a granddaughter, just her first year in college, and she told me she wasn't even there 3 weeks, and this young man kept banging on her door 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, talking about he want to talk to her and stuff. And I said, no, what you do is you alert security and you report him because you don't know him. And 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, you not coming for no talking 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. I said it because his thing was to overpower you and do whatever. And she said that they never went out. They never said they were in a relationship or anything, but he felt that he needed to talk to her 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And I told her, I said, you got to be very careful. I told her about her mace, and everywhere she goes, she used to go with another person with her. Don't go anywhere by yourself. So she's been doing that. Every time I talk to her, she going to class, she'd be like, Nana, I'm on my way to class. She's in Georgia and I'm here, but I'm
What
like,
school is she at?
Albany State.
Oh,
Yeah, she's in Albany State. So I'll be like, okay, this is what's going on. I need you to check in with me. So she did that because she knew I was uneasy. But while she was here, and she knows my work in domestic violence. So I was like, remember this happened? And remember we went to this event and this happened and they talked about this. So she's aware and alert. So you're right, Dr. J. We need to bring more awareness to different signs and different attitudes that individuals will have because you really never really know. But
Yeah.
you need to pay attention. Stay woke, as the young people used to be saying. Stay woke in a relationship. Don't take anything for granted. And Natalie, like you said, you was like, hey, I'll give you back your gifts. Don't accept special gifts and stuff because you want some. Just like when you're on a date or you just meeting somebody and they want to over all of a sudden shower you with things. Yeah,
hmm.
this payday is coming.
Yeah.
Payday is coming, so you got to be careful, be awoke, pay attention to your surroundings, pay attention to them. And, one of the things I always say, don't just get to know his friends, who he hangs around with, and who she hangs around with, because men are victims of domestic violence as well. So we need to know who your inner circle is, who your outer circle is. to get
Absolutely.
some kind of leeway to know what type of relationship you're in because you simply don't know. So after this happened and you wound up in the hospital, what happened to him?
Nothing.
What do you mean nothing?
Nothing.
Was he arrested?
No.
So,
So what happened was um they, like I said, they financially they were very well off. And so the
oh,
first thing,
so they got paid. He because he had money.
it made it easier, I'm sure. So the first thing that he did was, okay, so let me go back. He went home, and his family saw that he was covered in blood, and they kept asking him what happened, and he just kept saying something happened to Natalie. So they really didn't know what happened. If I had just gotten hurt by somebody else or what happened. So they called my grandparents. And so my grandmother told them that I almost killed your son in here tonight. And he attacked my granddaughter. And so they said, well, can we come over? And my grandparents said yes. So they came over. They got to see the room. I never saw what the room looked like. They cleaned. Well, I was in the hospital over a month, so by the time I came back, it was totally clean.
Over a month and nothing happened to him.
No, so they came over that night, and my brother said that it was like the carpet was all covered in blood, the wall where I was wedged because, like I said, the blood from here, and like you could see bloody handprints. So I don't know if it was his, mine, both, but just a bloodbath. It was a small room. And so they came, they saw the room, they apologized, and they went home. And so my family has always had that belief that just because one person in your family may be bad doesn't mean that it's you. And so they still spoke to them and everything. So they went home, and I guess I don't know how much time in between, but he checked himself into a mental hospital, and they started coming to my hospital. They came to my bedside every day, and they would stay at my bedside. And then after a while, they realized that I was still, uh, you know, back in those days when you're at someone's hospital and you're in their room, you're bound to hear more things about their prognosis, and what's going on, and you get to see, you know, and the doctors, they don't know who family is now. We have the HIPAA law, but in some states, but they still really don't know. And so they were able to learn a little bit more. So I guess that's why they knew it would be good for him to check himself in a mental hospital. He stayed there for a while, and then he got out. And by the time he turned himself in, he already had a lawyer, knew when to go turn himself in so that he can get out the same day. He didn't have a record, um, yeah, so he got out, and then they started talking to my parents about maybe we could settle it out of court. And so, but that point is when my parents and my grandparents were like, "There's no need for you to ever come back here again. There's nothing we can talk about that." We're going to press charges. So the law is I had just turned 18. And so that's why it wasn't my parents pressing charges. And so, and then of course, to see if I'm going to live or die will determine if it's murder or manslaughter. So then once they started seeing me turn back around, um, once I got out of the hospital, then they pressed the charges for attempted murder. However, our trial went on over a year, And so he kept asking for continuances. And this is something that happens a lot in domestic violence. This is also something that happens a lot in rape cases.
Yeah.
The problem is that, just like you said, Dr. Thicklin, you're traumatized and it's to relive it. And so the lawyers, unfortunately, they know this. And the main thing that they want to do is, who will give up first? A victim. You want it to go away. You feel
Right.
embarrassed. You feel
Exactly.
ashamed if you don't have the right people in your corner. Even if you do, it's still that part of you that people don't mean to say certain things, but awareness is just that. We're trying to raise awareness. So you don't want to say things like, well, Dad, you're so stupid. How could you stay so long? Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you do this? Oh, you should have did this. Oh, it couldn't have been me. People tell me that all the time.
All
I
the
said
time.
over
Yep.
30 times. Oh, it couldn't have
Yep.
been me, honey. I ain't never been in no type of relationship like that. Do you think I
Hmm.
just walked up and said, "Hey, would you be that type of person to attack me?" And he said, "Yeah, probably." And I said, "Okay, let's just try my
Right.
luck."
Right. You don't see the picture when you're in the frame. You
Yes.
don't.
And so a lot of times victims give up, family members even get discouraged, and so I moved. By that time, I moved back to New York, and my mother was only communicating with the lawyers over the phone, and they were like, "Oh, well, we're working it out. Oh, it's continued again." And a couple of times we came back to Virginia, and it was continued, so we had to go back, and it was a lot because remember, I'm still partially handicapped. I'm still with a patch on my eye a year later. I still can't go to the store by myself a year later. Um, so they said, "Well, we know this is a lot of back and forth." And we've now agreed with his lawyer a plea deal, but it really wasn't a plea deal. By the time they got into the court that day without us being there, because we thought, oh, okay, they're going to handle it, he's going to still get attempted murder. The lawyers went back and forth and they lessened the charge down to unlawful assault, which is a misdemeanor.
Wow.
And so he never served a day in jail. They told him that he would have probation for a certain amount of years or whatever. But come to find out later when I testified, he had broken that probation. It got with someone else and attacked that person. And then after all of that, insult to injury to my injury, because I couldn't go to school, I couldn't join the military, which was my backup plan, I thought. Um, he went on and went into the military. And when he went into the military, he learned even more. He learned even more things and more ways to attack someone because that's how they train you. And I think he went over to Desert Storm. So, you learn a lot more, you see a lot more.
Is he dead?
No, man, very much alive and appealing every minute he gets to get out of jail. How my story came out, Dr. Valerie, is um, over 20 years later, they found me and asked me to testify against him because he had continued to keep doing this. Every time he got with a girlfriend and she wanted to break up, he would do something to, really attack her. And so the last person, he what happened was she was breaking up with him. He showed up at her house and she realized that he was sitting parked outside. He was like down the street, but he started calling her name. She ran back and jumped back in her car because he had done that before, attacked her in her house and had her locked in. So this time she jumped in the car, but by the time she got down the street and got to a red light, he came and rammed her car, busted the door open, snatched her out, started trying to gouge out her eyes because he learned it in the military. And then she bit his finger to get him off because he did serious damage to her eyes. And once she bit the finger hard enough to get him off, he in turn grabbed her again and bit off her cheek all the way
Wow.
down to the bone, the size of a half a dollar. He spit it on the ground and he did what he always does. He went home as if nothing happened. And
I
when
was like, where's his parents? Where's his family?
his
No,
family said that it wasn't his fault because he had PTSD from the military, and it was the military's fault, and that he was seeking to get help because he called the VA hospital that morning, and they said they couldn't see him that morning and they couldn't get him in right away, and that was his defense. And actually, guess what, Dr. Valerie? It almost worked. He was looking at 5 years. Five,
that's all.
five, because they were really believing the defense of PTSD and the fact that he had called the VA hospital that morning. He called the VA hospital that morning. Then he called his mother and he said, "Mom," and and this testimony is on her. She did an interview on the news and said he called me that morning and told me that, "Mom, I think I have that thing called PTSD and I need help." That's what he told her. And then that evening, that night at 11:30 is when he went and attacked the other woman, Claudia, and bit her face. So that was his defense. So his mother was saying it's not his fault. And we have proof like he did call the VA and he did call and tell me this. And, you know, and then came Natalie. And the prosecutors were like, wait a minute. Here's this woman that you attacked so brutally so many years ago, and you
Same
weren't in the
woman.
you weren't in the military. And so that's how the judge ended up giving him 35 years. And this was only a
Still
few
not
years
enough.
ago. No, not enough. He'll be 85.
Still not
Wow.
enough.
Exactly.
You know, what a compelling story. And I know our time has gotten away from us, but inside of this, we're seeing patterns of behavior. We're seeing patterns. And what I like to bring to attention, some of these patterns, once again, go way back. You know, hearing about his affluent parents, so perhaps it wasn't abandonment necessarily, but could have been abandonment of affection, could have been a number of things that may
Yes.
have led to that. You know, his sense of control and whatever he latches on to, he
Mm-hmm.
has to possess.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are the signs that people need to understand. Those are possessive signs. Those signs he's got to possess it. He's got to control it.
Mm-hmm.
The little signs, the little quiet thing, the calmness inside of it, but compliance. Once again, I'm complying until you go outside of what I want you to do.
That's correct.
Uh, this is amazing, and kudos to the prosecutors and those that were smart
Yes.
enough to
Yes.
look at his record and go way back 20 years earlier, like
Yes.
you said, prior to military, that he had displayed that same type of behavior. So,
Which just means, shows that not enough attention was given to domestic violence. It wasn't serious enough for anyone to act. Otherwise, he wouldn't have had this trail that he's had. And then for his parents, his family to know he had this type of behavior, and just because it was their baby, they went along with it.
And
It's
clearly,
sad. It's
because
just
who would
sad.
show up to someone's hospital room and stay there for so long, and know to say, go check yourself in. So it tells me that I'm sure there was someone before me. There
Mm.
was definitely someone before me. And on the last show, Your Worst Nightmare, there's a police officer who was actually on the force and knew of the other officers at that time. And he said that their focus at that time was so strong on drugs. And that's when the crack epidemic had just started. So to look at intimate partner violence and the fact that we knew each other and everything, that's why it was just like, okay, they knew each other. She must have said something or did
Yeah,
something.
but he almost killed you. I mean, it's attempted murder.
Mm-hmm,
It doesn't matter.
mm-hmm.
And this is why we need to continue doing what we do to advocate for those coming behind us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And especially young, because I've seen it as young as in middle school that
Because
I've
they're
taught.
bullies. These
Yes,
bullies will be big abusers.
yes. And definitely on college campuses. And I want you to know, Dr. Valerie, I'm 3 hours from your granddaughter, so I can drive there if need be.
Thank you so much. I
And tell
appreciate
her to contact her Title IX and find out what they're gonna do.
it.
What will they do? Like, don't dismiss it, because even if he never bothers her again, it's not to say that he won't do it with someone else.
Exactly. Exactly. And, like I said, I've educated, but you could be educated on things and
Hmm.
still think it's never going to happen to me.
Hmm. Yeah. So yeah, find
Exactly.
out what the
Any
Title IX
closing
court order
remarks?
is.
You have a book, don't you?
I do have a book.
What's the name of it?
It is Surviving Her, and it is an anthology, and it's several different women, and we're all telling our stories. So your mine is another court case, so it talks about my experience going back to court to testify, which is one of the scariest things, is going to court. You can find my book. You can email me and purchase it. If you purchase it through me, you get an autographed copy. If not, you can find it on Amazon. It's $10.
And
And
what's your email?
my email is Natalie Purdie, and that's NATALIEPURDIE @yahoo.com. And this upcoming Saturday, they have Surviving Her and Surviving Him, and it's part two of the anthology, and that comes out this Saturday as well. And my
Oh,
daughter's actually
congratulations.
in that one. Thank you. My daughter's in that one, and she's talking about her experience on the college campus.
Wow.
Yes.
Awesome. Congratulations on your
Thank
work.
you. Thank
Um,
you.
Dr. J, any closing remarks?
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you, Natalie, for your
Oh,
courage and for what you continue to do.
Thank
I'm
Thank you
all
for,
lightheaded from not breathing.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Breathe, right?
Ooh,
Thank you for what you do. I just want to say to our viewers that are watching, I want you to share this. Take this and share it with someone that you know. It can make a difference. And I want you to share it not only with ladies, but share it with men.
Oh
yes.
yes.
Men need to understand the mindset of what happens through Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, but also the pain that it causes. And I don't know a man alive that would like to see their daughter, their sister, or their mom go through this type of pain and anguish. So I want to say there's help if you want help. If you want to change, you can change. And once again, thanks.
Thank you so much, Natalie.
Thank you. Thank you
Purdie,
both.
NATALIEPURDIE @yahoo.com. Reach out to her if you enjoyed her testimony. This is an email that you can reach her directly. And
Yes.
I thank you so much for sharing your story. I thank you so much for the courage to continue, even after all these years. It doesn't matter how long ago it was, because it was like almost 20 something years for me as well, but just to hear it, it makes me relive things too.
Mhm.
And it's, you have no idea unless were a victim, or someone who's been victimized. You have no clue what it does. So I thank you for continuing your work. And I thank you, Dr.
Thank
J,
you.
for also your work you do in the community for men and women. And together we will stand together. We will bring
Absolutely.
awareness so that these perpetrators can be brought to justice.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely.
Good night
Thank
and
you.
God bless.
Good night. God bless. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.